everyone, welcome to the Shaqir Hussyin show. I'm super excited. Today I have someone who I consider to be a legend, a living legend in not just marketing and business, but someone who really is able to predict a handful of things, which is somewhat scary, but very empowering too. I first got introduced to this gentleman back in 2009 when I was doing network marketing, MLM. I was trying all sorts of stuff. And I came across this concept, which was basically Google AdWords marketing. And I didn't know, but you could place these tiny little ads on the internet and literally have people come to you. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is the most coolest thing ever, because I don't have to go and harass friends. I don't have to go to networking events and print out cheap Vista business cards and hand them over. I used to walk around with DVDs. Like, just imagine DVDs. Do people even use DVDs these days? I used to walk around with DVDs and tell people, hey, watch this DVD and then go to this website, put my long, ugly affiliate URL, and then, I'm going to call you back. Anyway, 2009, I learned about this power, this concept called Google AdWords by this gentleman called Perry Marshall. And over the last basically decade, Perry, you have impacted my life and obviously hundreds and thousands of other people's lives. But in this case, we're talking about me. My life has been impacted by your work, by your thinking. I was also very fortunate to meet you in Chris Cardell's UK seminar, which then you were very graciously invited me to have dinner, which that took on another conversation. But we have around 30 to 40 minutes today. So I'm super excited. Perry, for anyone that's living under a rock, kind of please tell us a little bit about, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Well, it's great to be talking to a guy from Istanbul today. That's really fun.
I'm actually I'm here in Istanbul just on a week trip.
Yeah. So I want to go to Istanbul. We were talking about that before we started. So I'm known as the guy, best known probably as the guy that wrote the book on Google Ads. And when I first wrote it, Google was this tiny little weird company in Mountain View, California, and it was the only search engine with all white, and all the rest of them had all this stuff going on, right? And so it seemed kind of strange. But then shortly after I wrote that book, Google went supernova, and then all of a sudden everybody was advertising on Google, and it became this massive gold rush. And so I guess I'm a little bit famous because I landed on the top of that heap. Now, I think the reason that I landed on top of the heap, one of the reasons, was because I understood the 80-20 principle. And in 2013, I introduced a book called 80-20 Sales and Marketing, which is now kind of a classic marketing book that I think everybody should read. And so I've really broadened. We have a very good selling book on Facebook advertising as well. But 80-20 is really the center of it all, because it's the part that's going to last forever. I mean, like someday, 30 years from now, Google is going to get like sold to Nabisco, and people are going, you remember that really famous company that, it's kind of like IBM, they used to like run, or AT&T, like the world used to revolve around them, and oh my goodness, how times have changed, right? Like that's going to happen, right? Sooner or later, that will happen. But 80-20 is not going to go away. And so I don't know how much you want to talk about that. I'll kind of leave that up to you, but and I have a wife and 6 kids. 2 of them are adopted from China. So I have 4 standard issue, 2, added on later. And my wife is a superhuman, because if she wasn't, I wouldn't be able to do all this stuff. And so I'm a very fortunate man. I am blessed.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, I've got so many questions, so we're going to get straight into it. By the way, I do recommend everyone go and buy that book, 80-20. It is by far one of my top 5 marketing books of all time. Everyone in my team, my family, friends, I recommend this book to literally everyone and anyone that listens to me. And I just, look, one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about what you teach, Perry, is I've literally taken, your the information that you've imparted and I've applied, and I've seen amazing results. I was just sharing with you how one of my campaigns pulled in multiple seven figures in profits just after reading something about this concept of hyper responsive buyers. Okay. Before
Mm.
that, I thought someone buys, they buy. If they don't buy, like Dan Kennedy would say, you follow up until they die. I'd follow up, just like basic. But I would not put any emphasis, significance on the type or quality of buyer that is available to purchase at the most premium level. And I remember reading your book and thinking, yeah, I don't know. Let me see. Because I have a $40,000 per year mastermind, and I've had like 160 people ish join that. And I thought, okay, let me see. And then I had, people being able to buy $100,000 program. And I just remember that like to be the most insane thing. So in any campaign that I run right now, any business, any marketing, anything at all, I always ask myself, okay, who's the most hyper responsive buyer? Because out of, every 100, maybe there's like at least 2 or 3. And what is the most premium thing I can offer? If they want to come and spend time with me in my house, if I need to fly someone over to their house, whatever the case is, that's probably the biggest thing I got amongst 101 things. And then the second thing, which I'm really excited, and I don't talk about it publicly, but I'm going to give you credit because you have been the person. And I remember attending the seminar and you talked about equity consulting. And like, I had no idea you were an early investor in Infusionsoft and all of this. And so I told myself, okay, Shaq, don't just do things for income, but do it for equity, because there are people willing to do it. And since then, I've probably worked on around 4 deals, equity based. Just last month, I think it was last month, I got paid $35,000 to write someone's webinar, but they're giving me 25% of an entire 7-figure business. And I'm like, so I was like, I just wanted to say, Perry, like those things, super grateful. Anyway, next time you're in London, I'll make sure I take you out. As for everyone else in the audience right now, tell us why it's so important about this 80-20 concept, and how did you come across it?
Well, so when I do live seminars, sometimes I will go through this exercise and I'll say, everybody who owns shoes, stand up. So everybody stands up. And I'll say, all right, if you own less than 5 pair of shoes, sit down. And then quite a few people sit down. If you own less than 10, sit down. And already most people are sitting down because most people do not own more than 10 pairs of shoes. But there's still an appreciable number of people standing up. And then I start doubling the number. I don't go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. What I do is I go 5, 10, 20, 40, 80, 160, 320, 640. And you know what? There's always a few people still standing when I get over 160. Always. Okay. And a couple of times I got numbers like 600 shoes, 800 shoes. Like I had 250 people in an audience once, and there was one lady standing when I got to 640. I go, how many shoes do you have? And she goes, 800. Okay. Now, what most people don't know is everything is that unequal. Okay. And it's a perfect illustration of the 80-20 principle, because it's the 80-20 principle says that 20% of the people have 80% of the stuff, and 20% of the 20 has 80% of the 80, and 20% of the 20% of the 20% have 80 of the 80. So I'm not going to ask you to do a bunch of math in your head, but what that means, for example, is 1% of the people own 50% of the shoes. Okay, so what that means in a room full of 250 people is 3 of them, like three out of 300, let's say, 1% are gonna own 2,000 pairs of shoes, and the other 99% have 2,000 pairs of shoes. Okay. Now, this isn't just true of shoes. It's pretty much true of anything. It's true of how often do you fly on an airplane. It's true of how many canker sores you got. It's true of like the most bizarre, trivial things. It's true. It's like 80% of the walking goes through 20% of your house. And 80% of the traffic is on 20% of the rug. And you know where it is because you can see where the thing is worn. And everything is like this. Everything is unequal. And it actually follows a very predictable pattern of inequality. And it's true of incomes and real estate and domain names. Oh, the same audience where one lady had 800 pairs of shoes, one guy had 5 million domain names.
What?
Okay. No, now he might have been like a Michael Jordan of domain names, and you wouldn't get that every day. Okay. Like, but in a room full of 300 marketers, it's almost inevitable somebody's going to have more than 10,000. Okay. Everything's incredibly unequal. And so I had known sort of kind of what the 80-20 principle is, and I'd heard about it for years, and most people have. Like, most people have heard a little bit of this, but I didn't understand. I read Richard Koch's original 80-20 book, and I suddenly realized, hey, wait a minute. This is a law of nature. This is like gravity, like the size of planets and the size of craters on the moon and the size of stars and how far away the stars are, like all these things that are all 80-20. And when I realized it, and then later I actually figured out the formula behind it, which got published in Harvard Business Review 2 years ago. It was like, oh my word, I can predict exactly what masses of people will do. And I know that if I get 300 people who have at least one pair of shoes, I'm going to have one person who has at least 300 shoes. It is exactly the way I told you. And so all of a sudden it was like I had this X-ray vision. It was like, oh my goodness, this will tell me where to look for holes in my business. That if you have a certain number of people who paid $10,000 for something, there's inevitably some people that would pay you $1 million for something better. Okay. They won't pay you $1 million for the same thing. Okay. I call this the principle of the $2,700 espresso machine. It's as predictable as gravity that for every 1,000 people that'll spend $5 on a latte, one person will spend $2,700 on an exotic stainless steel espresso machine. And if you know this, you know something that 99% of people don't know.
Yeah, that is a huge, in marketing, in the entrepreneurial world, they talk about secrets. Everyone has secrets. That is probably one of the greatest marketing secrets of all time. And I use a similar example, which is the $500 or $1,000 Mont Blanc pens, right? Like, you can buy a pen for $1, but then why do people go and buy all these expensive pens? Okay, and then they're not happy with one of them. Okay, they want multiple of them, and then they want the limited edition ones. That being said, thank you for that explanation. And you did talk about predicting. There's a great blog post. Obviously, I've been a reader of your stuff for many, many years, right? Like, since the days I couldn't even afford online courses. So we're going long way back, right? 10 years ago. And you would come up with these predictions, and so many of them would come true. Recently, you predicted one, which was like, there's going to be riots in America because kids will discover how they've been duped, and they're not going to, pay back their loans. And then as soon as you publish, I don't know if you read the comment, right? Someone posted an article saying, hey, Perry, you're right. Look at what's happening. There's riots because the kids are saying they don't want to pay back. Another more interesting one for me anyway, which is the Bitcoin prediction that you did at Tim Francis' event when it was only $600. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and then like, where do you see this going? And then I have a few other questions.
Well, the numbers 80-20 are not carved in stone. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 90-10, sometimes it's 95-5. But you can actually figure out when you're going to have more even distribution and when you're going to have the really extreme. Like 95-5 is really extreme. Like if 5% of the people make 95% of the money, well, guess what? The internet is 95-5. Almost everything on the internet is 95-5. So, there's dozens of car manufacturers. There's one Google, there's one Amazon, there's one Facebook, there's one eBay. There's not even a close second to most of these. And that's because the internet's 95-5. And what the frictionlessness of the internet does is it creates monopolies. Okay, and monopolies create dissatisfied, disgruntled people. Okay, and so one of the things that you learn to do when you study 80-20 is you look for bubbles. You look for things that are about to break. And one of the things that became very obvious to me was that college tuition had been going up. I don't know what the number is. Isn't like 3 or 4 times the rate of inflation for the last 20 years, and university costs have just been going up and up and up. Well, my co-author on my Facebook book, Tom Malash, he pointed out, he said, well, Perry, there is a very specific reason why this is happening. Let me explain it to you. And he said, it's all about feedback loops. He says, when you sell something and you have a return policy, that's a feedback loop. And if you got 10 products and one of them has a 25% return rate, like this thing sucks, right? And he says, so listen, Perry, he goes, back in the 70s, people just worked a part-time job and they scraped together some money and they went to college and maybe their parents helped them out. They didn't have all these loans and college was cheap. He goes, but then we had these government-backed student loans, and they they worked, and they got all these kids going to college. But then, like they passed a law that said if you go bankrupt, you still have to pay your student loan, and it created this huge bubble, and it created a runaway situation where all this money is flowing into universities like crazy. And now the universities, because they are marketers, they're not really scientists, they're not really professors, they're marketing. If you want to market to 18-year-olds, what do? You have nicer cafeterias and nicer dorm rooms and nicer student centers and nicer lawns and better food and all this stuff. Not better courses, not better classes, not better professors. And pretty soon all the universities are in a big arms race. And he goes, this thing is totally out of control. And we're both going, yeah. And you know what? It's going to break. And I was talking to a guy a couple of years ago. He goes, I'm going to guess what's going to happen. He goes, I think instead of having Occupy Wall Street, we're going to have Occupy Sally Mae. He goes, I think some charismatic person's going to get up and they're going to go, hey, everybody, I'm not paying my loans back. Who's with me? You can repossess my car. You can take away my degree. You can throw me in jail. Not paying it back. Who's with me? And it turns out that actually happened in January. Now that doesn't turn out to be what took it down, though. You know what's taking it down? COVID. COVID is going to destroy. My prediction is 25% of the universities are either going to go out of business or consolidate, get acquired by other universities. And there's going to be a massive reduction in tuition. There's going to be a big push to online classes. And you know what? MIT, Harvard, Stanford, they're going to do fine. and like Roosevelt University in Illinois, not so good. You know what I'm saying? So you can, when you understand 80/20, you can see things like this happening before they even happen, and you can be certain that they'll happen.
Well, in terms of 80/20 on, we're going to go a little bit off topic, but just like the move towards, you know, banks shutting down, or like all the whole financial, you know, the collapse, recession, all of this stuff. Obviously, it's been
Yeah.
pushed by this COVID. But what's your perspective and your insights on that? And what business owners do at this time?
Okay. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I've got a client named Damian Dagan. He is a data scientist recruiting company. So he is a data scientist and he runs a company that recruits data scientists. And he follows a gentleman named Akhil Patel, who is an analyst in the UK. And they are making some predictions that I think are probably correct. And here's what they are. What Akhil Patel says is that the world has been running on an 18-year real estate cycle for a couple hundred years, and it's very predictable. And that real estate is really the foundation of all this stuff. Even though most people pay attention to the stock market, that underneath it is really real estate prices. And so the beginning of the 18-year cycle started at the 2007-2008 crash. And what they are predicting is that the economy is going to continue to expand for 14 years after that, and then it's going to crash. And that what we're in now is a mid-course correction. And what they're saying is, this year, you know, you're going to see that it's going to go down, but it's going to start going right back up. Their argument for that, now this is not what most people are telling you, right? Most people telling you like, it's Armageddon, everything's blowing up, right? The world is coming to an end. Well, he said, anytime you actually have a real crash, the housing market collapses, mortgages drop. And now I lived through this. I had a whole bunch of clients in this. In fact, I lost a whole bunch of clients when 2008 hit, okay? Everybody I knew in mortgage went bankrupt. Everybody I knew in real estate went bankrupt. Now, let me ask you a question. Are the mortgage and real estate people you know right now going bankrupt?
No.
Has the housing prices crashed?
No.
No. In fact, mortgages are going crazy with like negative interest rates. So we're going to bounce right out of this COVID thing. The big crash is going to be mid to late next decade, or mid to late this decade, like after 2025 or so. That would be my prediction. It is consistent with other signals that I have picked up, okay? I think, so here's a more internet marketing perspective. When COVID hit, the cost of internet traffic dropped by 30 to 70% overnight. By late March, the cost of clicks on Facebook was at the lowest it had been in 5 years, maybe 6 or 7 years. And we were telling, because we got tons of customers that do this, like, hey, everybody, if you can possibly spare the change, go buy yourself some new customers on Facebook, because all the big corporations pulled all their advertising. Click prices have already gone back to normal. Look at the stock market. The stock market is back to normal. the stock market is not acting like there's a $10 trillion pandemic and you can't go to soccer games. So Damien, I mentioned him a few minutes ago. He said, well, I saw this coming. I put money aside, and now I'm heavily investing in my business this year while the pandemic's going on. I also think that we will be out of the woods with the pandemic by midwinter. Like by January, we're going to be coming out of this thing. But I don't think the pandemic will be over before it's also ripped apart the American public school system, which is like the biggest monopoly in the world. So give me some feedback on that. I know this is not what you're used to hearing, but what do you think?
No, I mean, this is great information, because I'm taking a lot of notes, and I mean, I can go so many different ways in this. What are you doing on a personal level to protect yourself and to focus on how to prosper? Because you've obviously experienced so many of these recessions and these whatever, right? Like, talking very selfishly for myself, this is going to be I started my business in 2009 when the recession happened, right? And so, and then I realized, oh, this is great. So I rode that wave. And so now I'm like looking around and I'm asking my friends, my mentors, what are you guys doing, to protect yourself? Like, are you focused on investing in different asset classes, saving cash, learning new skills? Like, what's the thing that you're doing? You're spending your 80-20 on?
Well, so the most important thing of all is every day when I wake up, I start my day with what I call Renaissance time. And Renaissance time is I get out of bed, I boil a pot of tea, I sit down, I got a notebook and a pen, and I pray, I meditate, I get my thoughts sorted out. No social media, no email, no news, no TV, turn on some music. Now, I know everybody's kind of heard, yeah, you should probably do stuff like that. I'm absolutely religious about it. I think the most precious commodity that any entrepreneur has is their own space to think clearly and to be proactive instead of reactive. Okay, it's really easy to like roll out of bed, pull on a pair of pants, and sit down and start answering emails. And it feels good because, okay, nip that in the bud, nip that in the bud. Oh, boy, that crisis only started an hour ago. I fixed that, okay? And you're like, but what that does, it leaves you totally exhausted, okay? I do email starting at 11:30 every day for an hour, and then I'm done, and then I go on and do things, and it's in a very finite space. And the first priority goes to creative space. Now, what does this have to do with recessions and all this kind of stuff? Well, all right, so COVID hits and everybody is like, right? Like the world is in free fall and we don't know when it's going to land and how hard it's going to crash, and you don't know anything, right? Think of what it was like 1 week into the pandemic. You're sitting in your house going, okay, now what, right? Okay, so the best resource that you can have then, or in any other crisis, because you're going to have one every day, is a protected space where no crisis gets to interrupt it for any reason. Okay, and this is your private mental space. Have you ever read a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
No, but my wife is with me and she goes, yeah.
It's very famous, okay? it was written by a guy who survived the Holocaust. Okay, and he was a psychologist who lived through the Holocaust, and his wife died in the Holocaust, but he got out. And it's a beautiful book. The book really inspired a lot of self-help books and things that came later. Okay, so it's like you're reading one of the original great classics. Okay, and what he said in that book, he said, I could be living in a concentration camp barefoot in the snow with a shovel, and I could have some guard yelling at me. But unless I let that guard inside my head, he can't keep me from imagining that I'm having a conversation with my wife. In other words, he's saying they can put you in prison, but your mind is not a prison unless you let them have it. You know what I'm saying? Now, anybody who's like gone bankrupt, had their car repossessed, being evicted from their house, had a business failure, you sort of know this. And one of the things, like when people go through horrible personal disasters, one of the things they find out is, well, I went bankrupt, and you know what? The big orange ball in the east came up in the sky the next day. Guess what? You know, there was still like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I found a way to put some food in my mouth. It was embarrassing, but we still got through it. Well, we moved in, like I got one client, Mark McShirley. He moved in with his wife's parents when everything was terrible, and they lived in the basement. Like, well, okay, that is far from an optimum situation, but this kid still had a roof over his head. He still had a bed. He's still eating. Okay, it's humble pie, but you get out of it, right? Well, Renaissance time is like, well, I'm not going to wait until a disaster comes. I'm going to reserve this for myself every day. It's me and my notebook and God and nothing else, right? And I am going to get myself okay before I go face the world. And I cannot tell you how many people, like I had a show of hands with my roundtable members a few months ago. I go, how many of you, like, you got this pandemic, you got this insanity, your business is going crazy. How many of you, like, Renaissance time just totally kept you sane? And like all these hands went up. They're like, yeah, you know, because they can't get me.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. Perry, knowing what you know now, if you were to go back, say the last 10 years or even the last 20 years, because you've been doing this for a long time, what is the business model that you would choose? You know, from info marketing to software to buying and selling, what is it, that business model that you think, okay, yeah, because you talk a lot about network effects and, you know, a whole nother thing. And so what is that business model that you would say is ideal to either start now? Yes, to start now.
Okay, so I'm not going to give you a business model. I'm going to give you an ingredient to look in that's in a lot of business models, and it's called network effect. Now, there's a really nice summary. I have a book. It is just about to come out. Like, if this podcast takes a week to get out there, it'll already be on Amazon. It's called Detox, Declutter, Dominate by Perry Marshall. Detox, Declutter, Dominate. It's a short book. It's only 36 pages, I think, okay? And there's a section on it about, it's called Network Effect for Mere Mortals. Now, let me explain what network effect is, because this is a piece of advice that will literally serve you for the next 20 years, okay? And I want to say that a lot of people say, oh, you know, this business is really hot, you should go do this, or that market is really hard, you should go do that. And what ends up happening is everybody gets in too late, and it ends up being bad advice. Okay, this is not bad advice. This will serve you. So network effect is when Uber gets more riders, which attracts more drivers, which lowers the wait time, which attracts more riders, which attracts more drivers, which lowers the wait time. And all of a sudden it's 2020. Would anybody in his right mind start a taxi company now? No. No. Just no, right? Why? Because any city where Uber operates, you can get a ride for anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes, typically 5 or 10, and the car comes and gets you, right? And it's a clean car, and it doesn't have bulletproof glass in it. You don't have to argue with somebody about whether you'll take your credit card or not, or any of that crap, right? Okay, so network effect is camouflaged in lots of other ways. Okay, so with Uber or Airbnb or eBay or Facebook, network effect is super obvious. Okay, but there's other forms of network effect. If you look in the book, it's step 6 of a 7 steps in Detox, Declutter, Dominate. I actually break it down. There's about 10 different kinds of network effect for mere mortals where, okay, you might not be Uber. And this is for companies that don't have millions of dollars of venture capital. All of the Silicon Valley network effect stories are, okay, $40 million round A and $80 million round B and $200 million round. I'm not talking about that. I have all kinds of, so let me give you an example. And my book talks about this guy too. So Mark McShirley is the guy who lived in his in-laws' basement for, I don't know, a year. And and this was in the early days of Roof Simple. In fact, one of the things he did, he had a job, he was paying $40,000 a year. And he told his wife, you know what? I'm going to quit my $40,000 a year job. I'm going to go full-time in this business. It's hardly making any money. And if I have to sit in the coffee shop to figure out how to do this business right, I'm going to do that because the $40,000 a year job consumes too much of my energy. I will get further if I just do this. And she's like, well, okay, I guess that just means we'll live in with mom and dad for an extra 6 months. So whatever. And he got that business right. Now the network effect, there's a bunch of network effects in Roof Simple. It's a roofing company. But here's the biggest one, is online reviews. A roofing company in the Washington, D.C. area has 500 online reviews. Well, let me ask you a question. If Roof Simple has 500 online reviews and you're starting a roofing company in Washington, D.C., are you ever going to be able to advertise as cheaply as they can? No, okay? And guess what? The first day they open up in Philadelphia, they got 500 online reviews. Okay, now that's one of their network effects, and that's enough for today. You can read my book and get more. But that's just online reviews. Okay, it's not splitting the atom. Okay, now is it hard to get 500 online reviews? Well, they had to build their entire business to deliver good reviews, which means the customers had to have a great experience. You'll have a better experience buying a roof from Roof Simple than any other roofing guy in town. So I think that's really going to help people out. And the book is called Detox, Declutter, Dominate. It's on Amazon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Perry. I'm going to link all of the books below this video, you guys. So make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, go buy the books. I'm a big fan of Perry's book, so I'm definitely going to be recommending this. And I like to buy bulk so I can give it to my friends and family. And then I recommend you do the same. Perry, thank you so much. I want to respect your time. We are at the 38 minutes. Actually, I do have 2 more minutes left, so I'm going to use that. If there was a piece of advice that you can give to entrepreneurs who are you know, somewhat successful, and they're successful, but they're in that stage where they can, you know, as you would basically say in the power curve, they can really exponentially grow.
Yeah.
Apart from network effects, what is another thing that they should focus on over the next, say, I don't know, 3 to 5 years?
Well, so I think I'll give you two things. One thing is you need to hone your intuition and your listening ear. This is one of the reasons I think journaling is so good in the morning. Ask God a question and expect an answer and write it down. Ask a question and write down the first thing that comes. You can decide what to do about it later, but write it down. And now what you're doing when you do that is you're getting your connection to the head office cleared out. Okay. Another one is I would not be caught dead not in a mastermind group. Okay. And not all mastermind groups are created equal. There's a lot of free ones, and there's a lot of places where you could just go shoot ideas around with a bunch of people that are playing around in the sandbox, and you know, you could waste a lot of time with that. But if you have a really good group of people and you are not the smartest one in the room, and you have a good leader, you can go so far, so fast. You can avoid so many mistakes. You can get introduced to vendors and, you know, and sources of help and all kinds of stuff. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. You know, you're only as sharp as your 5 closest friends. Like you need to be challenged by people who are better than you, and they challenge you to really up your game. So.
Oh, that was that was powerful. I'm going to re-listen to this many times over. Perry, I really appreciate having you on this, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon, and even meeting you when all this craziness is over. So appreciate it. Thank you very much, Perry.
Shaq, it's been great.
I'm going to put all your links, perrymarshall.com. I'll put all the links below the video so people can find you and get your books. But thank you very much, Perry. Top man.
All right. Thank you. See ya.